Hello everyone again, and I don't know that the audience from this webinar is from which region as well, because I'm from currently sitting in Düsseldorf, Germany, and here is quite sunny afternoon, you can say, but I can imagine that in Pakistan it's already evening time. So good evening to everyone. First of all, I would like to specially thanks the professionals who are working for the capacity building of young food and human nutrition and dietetic professionals, the professionals from National Food Solution and Food Science News Network. So thank you very much for organizing this. One of the, I will say, we will use this word a lot of time. It's called vulnerability, and this is one of the vulnerable topic as well, which is VACCP for managing food fraud. And VACCP is basically the similar word relevant like we are using HACCP. So it's a VSCCP, vulnerability assessment and critical control point. But within this topic, today I will talk about mainly these three areas. Sorry, I can say there is some background music, if that can be closed so that there will be no disturbance for the audience. So we will talk about what is actually food fraud. We will go into detail of different types of food fraud and the risk associated with these food fraud and what's actually going on in the world globally regarding food fraud management. And most importantly, last but not least, we will also discuss about the mitigation plan to mitigate these food fraud risks and to safeguard our businesses and the health of consumers and again, the economic well-being of the consumers. And in the last session, we will definitely touch the question answer from the participants of this webinar. So just going through the definition of basically the food fraud, I just split the full definition into three parts so that you can easily understand the basic concept of food fraud from the definition itself. So the first part, which I made the part of definition, it gives you a clear indication that actually food fraud is an intentional activity. So by definition, it is like, this is a definition defined by GFSI, Global Food Safety Initiative, that food fraud is the deliberate and intentional substitution, addition, tampering, or misrepresentation of food, ingredients of food, packaging, labeling, and any misleading information or statement which made a product, which made about a product, which made about a packaging of the product for getting an economic benefit. And that can also cause consumer health as well. That can cause any impact on the consumer health. So this is basically a definition of food fraud, that it is an intentional or deliberate substitution, addition, tampering, or misrepresentation of food, food ingredients, or food packaging, labeling, product information, or false and misleading statements about a product or economic gain that would impact consumer. So now here, you can even understand, you will understand this topic more clearly. But this is called a risk matrix. In this slide, I prepare a risk matrix, which I develop on two axes. The right side axis is basically the risk which can occur due to unintentional way. The right side matrix is the risk which can occur by intentional, by deliberate acts. So normally before 2010 or 12, normally organizations were focusing on food quality and food safety. For food quality, they were using ISO systems like quality management systems. For food safety, they were using GFSI systems like FSSCINFO 22000, SQF, IFS, and different other BRC and different other food safety management systems. But due to certain incidents which happened in the past, these certification schemes need to be upgraded on the right side risk elements like food fraud and food defense. These are the intentional ones. Food fraud, I again add another column like the outcome. If the intentional deliberate act is done in the food chain to get an economic gain, then it is called food fraud. And if it is done to harm the public health, it is called food defense, which is bioterrorism. This is also another emerging concept, though already work is under process on these two things, but I would like to share with you with this particularly food fraud, because nowadays, considering COVID-19 situation and considering you can say considering high pressure on the product availability and the food security, these kind of incidents are happening in every part of the world, either it is a European region, American regions, Asian regions. So every region is facing food fraud incidents. Now, I will share with you after from this risk matrix, I will go into I will share with you different types of food fraud. I'm going you to get into how food fraud are categorized into different types, because it's just not a word of food fraud, but there is a different types of food fraud. The first type is substitution, which means replacing an ingredient or part of a product of high value with an ingredient or part of a product of a lower value. I will give you an example, which is in the slide as well, like olive oil. Olive oil is basically a very expensive type of oil. It's if I can just share with you the price in Europe, let's suppose it's range from 7 to 9 euros per liter. And if 20% or part of this oil is substituted with another vegetable oil, there will be no effect on health, but there will be effect on the pocket of consumer. And we are going to mislead the consumer. We are going to deliberately, you can say, cheat to the consumer, and it's called substitution. So this is one of the biggest type of food fraud. If I say out of 7, so this only covers around 60% food fraud cases linked with substitution. I will share with you some of the examples later on. The second type is dilution. This is a very simple type of food fraud where actually the food products watered down are diluted. The very simple example like adding water into the milk, and we normally see that sometimes it is considered an okay potable water adding or non-potable water. Both type of water, whether it is a potable or non-potable, if you are diluting a milk, it's called dilution, and this is also one of the type of food fraud. The third is also very important, and unfortunately, this one is also having one of the good share in the types of food fraud. It's called unapproved enhancement. It means addition of unauthorized, undeclared material to food product to enhance the quality attributes. Like dyes are being used in spices, especially Sudan dye for red chili. Likewise, melamine case, maybe as a food professional, as a nutrition professional, you heard in China, they were using it for increasing the protein value, because in China, the milk standard is based on fat plus protein as well, and the total solid content definitely. But in Pakistan, we are normally grading the milk based on the fat content. So in China, the players, the food players, they were actually using melamine to match the total solid content, especially the protein value. Now the fourth type of food fraud is concealment. This type of food fraud is normally done to hide the low quality, like concealment. Concealment is to hide. So to hide the low quality attribute of food products. And somehow in commodities business, especially the pulses, the lentils, like in Pakistan, I suppose, means alchana is a chickpea, split chickpea, and then many other pulses. They are being colored, and sometimes the colors are industrial dyes, and those industrial dyes actually you can see a pulses or lentil pack in a very beautiful shining appearance, and you buy it, but unfortunately it is having a coloring over it. So this is one type of food fraud as well, because a product which is, let's suppose, 100 rupees per kg, after coloring it gets better appearance, and means the players, the food players, the industry, they charge you 150 rupees. So it's just a artificial enhancement. It's called concealment of the attributes, of the quality attributes. And then the fifth one is gray market production. This is a tricky actually type of food fraud, because somehow many people say that, okay, this is somehow the industry norms and they can play in any market. But the basic definition of this gray market production is that the products in this category, which normally comes in this fraud category, are made by legitimate right holders for one jurisdiction, but they get sold in another territory, just considering the market or economic conditions, better exchange rate, tax evasion, illegal import factors. So this is called gray market production, because if a product is only being manufactured for the sake of, let's suppose, a Punjab territory, like, and you can say the wheat or sugar, but it is bounded with a boundary, a regional territory, a legitimate right holding of this province, and if the product is going into another province, it's called as gray market production, because government is not allowing to cross the product to another border. So it's also one of the type of food fraud. The second last is counterfeiting. Counterfeiting is somehow is a hot topic nowadays in our every province, either it is the Sindh province, Punjab, or in KPK. Our authorities are doing a lot of raids, and you have seen the news on the social media pages, like a famous brand is produced in a 5-marla house without any approval, without any a trademark approval or copyright approval. So these are the copies of popular brands which are being produced in those houses, in those facilities, and also sometimes copies of popular packaging concept. Like if a product is having a high-end sales value, like I can say, if the product is, let's suppose, like, can give you an example, like Canon, it's one of the famous brands. But any of the player sitting in a village or somewhere, they are using the same packaging design, same packaging scheme, and this is also called as a counterfeiting, and they are selling into the market, though they change the brand name, but actually they copy the same packaging concept. Last but not least, it's called mislabeling, and this is also one of the emerging concepts. Sometimes mislabeling linked with the false claims. False claim means we normally use the word, like if a product like basmati rice is only grown in Punjab, color track, but a distributor sitting in Karachi, he is collecting basmati from Punjab, basmati from Sindh, basmati from, let's go, Swat region, rice from Swat, and he's doing mixing and only claiming that it's a basmati. So this is also a false claim of origin. And sometimes this expiry pasting, tampering of the expiry detail, tampering of the origin detail. So this is also another type of food fraud. So these are the 7 different sort of food fraud which is normally in the market. And then here I will share with you some of the recent and some of the example from the past. A very recent example is Europol. I will give you a detail what is this Europol and later on. Europol is if I can share with you here, like Europol is basically a European intelligence authorities that work with the enforcement authorities of all the European countries, and they do combined raids, and their operation is called Europol Option Operations. So I can give you just one example which happened recently in May last year. And you can see 150,000 liter of fake extra virgin olive oil seized by this authority. 150,000 liter, 150 ton, means metric ton of fake extra virgin oil. And you can see the worth of this. So worth can give you an idea that why food fraud is being taken, because of opportunity. How big the opportunity was? 8 million criminal profit per year. They are earning 8 million profit every year with this food fraud. And due to this, 20 people gang arrested, and the gang comprised of German and the Italian people who are doing this big food fraud in the market, selling the product with saying extra virgin olive oil, because this is one of the expensive type of the product within the European market. So what they were doing actually, what was the type of fraud they were doing? They were doing concealment. Like I have here in my definition, why concealment? They were adding additive which is improving the color of the oil and giving the color appearance as a extra virgin olive oil appearance. So this is one of the type of food fraud. The second example is milk. There is a newspaper sheet, and this is also presented globally as well, that the Times of India published that the 70% milk which is sold in India is basically adulterated. And we also have the similar sort of condition in Pakistan as well, and in many other developing countries, because there is always an opportunity to feed the people. And as the country's population are bigger, fraud chances are also bigger, as you can say the opportunity and the motivation level is high, the bigger the fraud is. And then if I move toward the right side example, like seafood, here you can see this is an example of United States. On left side, I have given you an example of Italy and Germany. Right side, it's the United States. Seafood, 87% of red snapper which is being sold in US markets, study conducted in 2013, and they showed that 87% fish is mislabeled. That means the fish is from different type, but it is selling under red snapper. And likewise, in the in the bottom lower example, it's a baby food. And there is a big brand in UK, it's called Cow and Gate. They recall 7+ month baby food jars, and the jar was tempered, means tempered due to the expiry reason or due to the other information as well. So this was another example of food fraud which is happened recently, because it's just January. So this is the data which a company called Dessens, they prepared from 2010 to 2019. This is almost 10-year data. Based on this data, they categorize the food products or ingredients which are most vulnerable within this period. So here you can see the top left one, the highest number of food fraud incident recorded in seafood category, followed by dairy ingredients, which can be milk, which can be cheese, which can be many other products, and then meat and poultry. And you all know the big famous scandal of horse meat scandal that comes within this category as well. Then beverages, the juice, nectar, and drinks, we called it differently, alcoholic beverages, non-alcoholic beverages. So this is also one of the big category globally where food fraud is being done. Then spices and herbs, vegetable oil. Vegetable oil is the growing segment where you can substitute the high value part with the low value other vegetable oil. Honey in America, China, this is also one of the biggest fraud ingredient or product. Olive oil is an emerging one. And grains, as I said, most part of the time it's in grains, the coloring is being done. So this is one study. The other study, which is the European study, which is based on 2019 data. This is European Union Commission's data on food fraud. And here you can see the topmost is fat and oil. And the fat and oil, as I said, that olive oil and other expensive oil, they fall in this category, 44 topmost record. And then fish and seafood, again, meat products, fruit and vegetable, poultry, and so on. And last is nuts products. Now I will share with you very interesting example. Here you can have an idea that how these people are playing. Like nowadays, Corona situation is going on, and this news went in front of my eyes, and I just then pick and put this in the slide so that you can also see that people, they always think about from criminal aspects, and they are only having the economical motivation in their minds. They never care about the health of the security people who are saving us from this COVID situation. So around 6,000 soldiers deployed across South Africa, this is their national defense force, just like our military. And just imagine that the food which is distributed to these 6,000 soldiers, that was allegedly tempered, I mean expired food, was restickered, relabeled, and distributed to these soldiers. So just imagine that food fraud when you have that, because again, as I said, that it involves how big of the economic gain, how big the motivation, and how big the probability. Because everyone knows that people and authorities are not focusing on enforcement of food laws and regulations, and now they started that doing these kind of food frauds. In the market. Here is just a global prospect, as I have shared earlier, that I will give you an overview of global impact of these kind of food frauds. So here you can see in year 2009, the global impact on a food fraud was estimated 10 to 15 billion. Then authorities started, different academic people, industrial people, retail people, they started working on, thinking on different kind of food frauds and going into detail. And in 2013, the next data came, 45 billion. And in 2019, the new data shows that $50 billion cost or $50 billion impact due to the food fraud incidents per year in the market, in the global market. So here you can see an idea that of why this is one of the biggest factor to consider during building our food safety management system, building our quality control system, because it's really impacting the global economy. Here I can give you an example. This is just the latest example, and here actually you heard the name of Interpol, you heard the name of Europol. So Interpol is basically, it's a police of different countries. If they together work, we call them Interpol. So 83 countries police, and Europol means the European authorities, European intelligence agencies, and European enforcement bodies. So they collaborated together and they launched the operation. It's called Operation Opson. They started to conduct this kind of operation from 2013, but this year they especially launched the operation considering this COVID situation. And this is just a highlight of their operation from December 2019 to June 2020. Means they made 26,000 checks, 12,000 tons of fraudulent food they seized, and just check the worth of stock, they seized 28 million euros. I was reading an article yesterday that Germany is going to give 6 million euro to Pakistan as financial aid of Corona. So just imagine that a country is having received 6 million euro, they will remain obliged for whole of their time. But here 28 million euro stock seized due to food fraud incident by this Opson operation. and they arrested around 400 suspects who were involved in food fraud activities. And just imagine that these were not the suspects, these were the criminal groups who were working in these markets. 19 organized. So what does it mean now? Food fraud is very organized criminal activity. 19 organized criminal groups found involved in food. So this is just a picture for you that I said that, okay, let's share the picture of Pakistan. And every month, many colleagues know who are in my circle that I'm sharing this European newsletter. This issued monthly, and I just put the 2 months data of May and June. Here you can see in European newsletter, Pakistan food fraud incidents are being communicated. This is one side is a good sign that our authorities are really effective and working, and the other side is that our market is a vulnerable market as well. It's going to be a vulnerable market because in this monthly newsletter, there is only 10 to 12 food fraud incidents or 20 food fraud incidents. And if out of 12 to 15 or 20 incidents, we are having 2 or 3 from Pakistan, so it means Pakistan is also a vulnerable market and a very attractive market for the food fraud. And we are, and the incident which are published in this monthly newsletter of European Commission, I can see that every type of food fraud is going on in Pakistan as well, like unapproved treatment for different kind of products. Like the first example, the 2000 kg gold was sealed, 700 kg sugar adulterated with illegal chemicals. And then replacement or dilution type of food fraud, like milk contaminated is selling in Pakistan. Likewise, counterfeit or intentional distribution of misfit products in the market. So this is just a slide here with you that these kind of stories are now being published in the European market. So, and why the food fraud is increasing, as I shared earlier, that the food supply chain is getting complex and complex. And food players have some economic benefits out of it due to this complexity of supply chain and the economic challenges of the countries, because currently due to the COVID situation, every country's economy is suffering. So authorities are not really putting focus on the enforcement of the food legislation, or they are actually working on other parts as well. So considering this, there is economic pressure as well. So people are just picking the product, because if a product was 50 rupees per kg, and in COVID situation, if it is selling in 70 rupees, still people are buying because they do not know whether they will find this product after 2 months or 3 months or not from the market. So this is an economic challenge and global crisis as well. The third is increased pressure on unsurplus supplies, because due to this COVID situation, due to this global crisis situation, due to the other supply chain complexity issues, suppliers are same, and the small and medium supplier actually more affected than the large and corporate suppliers. So those suppliers have certain capacity, like if a supplier is having a capacity of producing 100,000 cartons, but now we see that, okay, there is a pressure, my retailer, my wholesaler is giving me order of 200,000 cartons. So what he will do some gray production, gray market production. He will do some, you can say, to fulfill the demand of ingredient, he will dilute the ingredient, he will replace the ingredient, he will do substitution. So these are the different factors. And if I will share with you level of fraud, so there is again a study from UK Food Safety Authority that the level of fraud in the industry is estimated around 10% of every organization turnover, which leads from 30 to 40 billion per year. This is a figure of 2015, as I said. And then, and handling and managing and closing of one incident, the organizational revenue sometimes spend 2% to 15% of annual revenue. So this is also one of the important factors. So these are the few factors why these are increasing, food frauds are increasing. And here I will share with you some data about historic development of food fraud. So in 2013, actually there was one of the big scandal of food fraud happened in UK. and the supply chain was so complex that many countries were involved: Belgium, Netherlands, France, and UK, and different markets as well. So based on this scandal in 2013 in GFSI conference, Global Food Safety Conference, they develop a you can say a think tank group from the professional, from the different labs, from certification bodies, from certification scheme owners, from retailers. So they develop a think tank and give them a task to develop a GFSI guideline for handling and managing the food fraud. And then in 2014, GFSI conference, they presented, and IFS was the first one, International Featured Standard was the first one to adopt and to implement and to develop the guidelines and to develop the requirement within its food safety management standard. And in 2015, BRC was the second who owned the requirements, who insert the requirements in the revised scheme. And in 2017, GFSI made it mandatory. Previously, it was a guideline, a requirement of the standard, but GFSI, in my last webinar, I have shared that GFSI is recognizing the food safety standards from the scheme owners. So GFSI issued the position paper that every food safety standard which is recognized by GFSI should have requirements for managing food fraud. And in 2018, all food safety standards which is recognized by GFSI is now having the requirement to manage food fraud, or you can say the food defense as well. Now I will give you a slight overview of the key element of vulnerability assessment and critical control point. So there is two major part of you can say this vulnerability assessment and critical control point. First is you have to do food fraud vulnerability assessment. And every standard has this first requirement. In GFSI position paper, they said that every organization who is applying for food safety system certification, they have a documented food fraud vulnerability assessment procedure, documented food fraud vulnerability assessment procedure to identify potential vulnerabilities and prioritize food fraud mitigation measures. So this is the first part, that every organization should have a food fraud vulnerability assessment documented procedure just to prioritize what sort of different food fraud can happen within the supply chain of that organization. And the second, based on the food fraud vulnerability assessment, you can then prepare a very comprehensive and effective food fraud mitigation plan to mitigate public health risk from identified potential food fraud vulnerabilities as well as the economic risk factors. This is just an improvement, again, a continuous improvement cycle, developing a food fraud mitigation plan. I will give you slight detail because due to the shortage of time, we have to, to stick on the limited information. Maybe we can have another session on the detailed overview of these activities, starting from vulnerability assessment, preparing mitigation strategy and defining risk, and then incorporating the risk into the enterprise food safety risk management, and then introducing control measures and reassessing to improve the system. So here I can share with you that food fraud generally occurs where the potential for and temptation of food fraud are high, and the risk of getting caught or sanctioned to be low. Means where normally it happened in those situations when you think that, okay, economic gain is high and the enforcement is low, we can have only little amount of fine, so for us there is no issue, let's do this food fraud. So this is basically the reason of going into the food fraud. So simply it's a combination of opportunities or suitable targets for food fraud and then motivation relating to the food frauds. And by combining this, you have to minus the inadequate control measures which actually the organization or authorities have, and then you can calculate the actual fraud vulnerability. So this is basically a science-based framework For understanding the food fraud risk, by analyzing these three aspects, you can estimate the food fraud vulnerability for any food product or ingredients. So opportunities, that why offenders are able to commit fraud. So you have to identify very clearly why offenders would want to commit food fraud. This is motivation, and then the control measures counteract the vulnerability resulting from these opportunities and motivation. And now, if I can share with you, these are the key areas which you have to consider to during your food fraud vulnerability assessment. Because here I list few areas which you will consider during your risk assessment for identifying food fraud vulnerability. The first thing is supply chain complexity. Nowadays, supply chains become vertically integrated, become more complex, and then it can lead to higher food fraud risks. So you have to identify the supply chain of your raw material, of your ingredients, of your packaging material, where you are getting. And then second thing, economic anomalies. You have to see that how the economic pressures are going on. You have to see price discrepancies in the market and economic factors that actually, as I have shared in my previous slides, you have to see the economic anomalies, economic pressure, economic viabilities, so that you can have an idea that, okay, from my raw material supplier, my product supplier, my packaging supplier can play or not. The third is geopolitical consideration. This is also very important. You have to evaluate political, food safety, security concerns of your sourcing regions. If you are sourcing something from China, you have to consider their factors. If you are sourcing something from Africa, you have to consider their factors. So this is geopolitical consideration of your supply chain, where you are sourcing your raw material, your product, your packaging material. And then supplier history, very important. Before choosing, just analyze the supplier history. Check the authorities' raid of that supplier facility. Check the fines made by the authorities for that supplier. Check the food safety issues. Check the complaint rate of those suppliers. Check the repute and integrity of that supplier. And last but not least, your relationship with your supplier. This is also very important. So for conducting food fraud vulnerability assessment, you have to consider these 5 points. Then for making a mitigation plan, you have to consider these 5 things. First of all, your QA system. How effective your QA system, this is also very important. And you have to consider that every raw material, every packaging material, every ingredient which you are procuring from the supplier should have a written agreed specification from quality, safety, food fraud attributes. So clearly defined so that you can avoid your raw material supply, your packaging material, your ingredient supply from any kind of food. And then second most important thing is testing. And testing, both internal testing and external testing and supplier facility testing. You should evaluate the capability. First of all, you should evaluate the capability of your testing mechanism. What supplier is testing? How authentic is that? How much you can rely on the certificate of analysis? And then your internal evaluation mechanism, and then the external evaluation. Then, and the testing should be done against the agreed specification in the first point. The third is traceability. You must do the traceability. Means if you are ordering 400 bags, go and visit the supplier whether he can produce 400 bags or not. Just do a mass balance. Just do a traceability drills. Quantity traceability and quality traceability, do both. And then the label verification. This is also very important because sometimes in retail brands, this part is very important because suppliers sometimes propose you put this sign, put that our chicken is sourced from organic farms, but actually there is no organic farm behind. So just see your label and do label verification. Fourth one, second last is the audit strategy. How robust your audit approach is. This is also very important. Either you are doing on-site audit or remote audit. And what are the anti-fraud clauses or requirements you are incorporating in your audit checklist? This is also very important. So this is the second last point. The last point is fraud monitoring, and keep on implementing, developing a food fraud monitoring system. Whistleblowing means whenever there is an incident happen, inform authorities, inform your customers that please return our product. We are going to withdraw our product because the ingredient was tampered. And it will build your integrity in the market and do proper food fraud verification activities and have a signed ethical code of conduct agreement with your supplier so that he will be liable toward any kind of food fraud activity. Now, the GFSI position paper is very clear on managing this food fraud vulnerability. And while developing your food safety management system, just make sure that if you are managing your unintentional risk, which is managed through HACCP, you are also managing the food fraud risk through VSCCP, vulnerability assessment and critical control. The center is for food defense, as in my earlier definition, it's basically an intentional contamination of the product, which is done due to ideologically motivated persons to harm the health of the consumer. So these three main things should be incorporated effectively into your food safety management system. And then you can say that, okay, you can manage the food fraud within your organization or within your supply chain, and you can build your organization trust, brand image in the market. So this content I precisely, you can say, prepared just to give you some insight about the global happenings, the types of food fraud, and the methodology to mitigate the risk from food fraud vulnerabilities. So thank you very much. And now I will see from the organizers of National Food Solution what are the different questions you asked during this webinar to answer. Thank you very much for.
Thank you, sir. We will go ahead and take some time for questions now. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your question into the comment box.
It looks like we have few questions from audience.
Yeah, thank you. I have received some questions already in my chat box, and these questions are very interesting. Like, how can we stop these type of frauds? So I already shared with you the mitigation plan at the end of my webinar. That you can, first of all, you can do the vulnerability assessment by, like in this. First, you have to do this food fraud vulnerability assessment just to gauge what kind of frauds are in your supply chain, and then you can apply these kind of tools to mitigate those risks. So this is one of the questions from, I think this question is from our an international colleague. It's called Vishnavi Sahu. So I hope you already got this answer from the presentation. And there is another question from Hafiz Adil that how can we reduce food fraud and risk in milk? Yeah, so again, in Pakistan, if I say, because I hope so this is linked with the Pakistan market, because as I have shared with you this slide, this one, that actually in Pakistan, there is a lot of opportunity for this milk sector because milk sector is not so much organized. There is no you can say sophisticated supply chain for milk distribution. 90% or more than 90% milk is still sold loose, and less than 10% is sold, maybe 6 or 7% sold in the processed form. So you cannot trace back to the origin from where it is coming, and then there is no structured supply chain right from farm till consumer till milk shops. And this is one of the challenging, but again, methodology is same. So from the methodology can be implemented for controlling this, because there should be a close collaboration of authorities, law enforcement agencies, academia as well, and some retailers and organizations to mitigate this risk. This can be possible. And then there is a question from Mia Umair that whether this food fraud, this vulnerability assessment, critical control point can implement in Pakistan. Yes, definitely. And many organizations has already implemented. I think more than 400 organizations in Pakistan have GFSI certification. So if they have GFSI certification, it means they have already implemented this. So these are the short. I just picked some questions and. I can ask if there is more question. We can discuss.
There's a question from one of the audience.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Does these frauds are responsible for food insecurities? Do food fraud is linked with food insecurity?
Yeah, definitely. As I have shared with you some of the elements that this due to this food insecurity, the food fraud is getting built up. I can share with you this slide here.